excited to introduce our next speaker. She is HubSpot's first Chief Customer Officer, overseeing the marketing, sales, and services teams and focused on reducing friction for the customer. A tech industry vet, she previously worked at Dropbox as CCO, Workday, and SAP. In 2019, she was named one of the most influential women in business by San Francisco Business Times, and we are so excited to have her on our stage. Today, she will be sharing a behind-the-scenes look at HubSpot's operating model, how she created full flywheel alignment, and how she prioritizes key initiatives to power the next phase of HubSpot's growth. Please join me in welcoming Yamini Rangan.
Thank you so much, Beth. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that really warm and kind introduction. I hope all of you are having a phenomenal day here at CMX. I was listening in the last couple of conversations, lots of notes and lots of tips. I am super excited to talk about how HubSpot powers its flywheel. But before that, I just want to say, for those of you who don't know HubSpot, we started about 14 years ago as a marketing automation company, and today we are a CRM platform that powers a lot of small, medium businesses. Our mission is really to help millions of businesses grow better. And if you think about that, that is an interesting, mission statement. What is growth? What is growth in 2020? 2020, I think we're going to remember this year forever, right? It has been a year of adversity, a year of change, a year of pivots. A lot of businesses have really had to shift their perspective this year. And there are a couple of stats that are mind-boggling for me. So 7.5 million small businesses in the US are actually going to shut down by the end of September. And Yelp actually reported nearly 132,000 small businesses will permanently close by the end of this month. So that is the times that we're dealing with. Companies are really thinking about how do they survive, how do they pivot, and how do they actually think about growth. And so the word growth is actually in question. So today what I want to talk to you about is a different framework for thinking about what growth is. Growth is not just revenue. Growth is not just, really increasing your customers. Those were the traditional ways that we talked about growth. But growth in today's context in 2022 is all about being resilient, being able to have a very resilient business model and a very resilient company that can actually pivot and bounce back from whatever 2020 is throwing to us. And so I want to actually talk about how we think about resilient growth and what our playbook is. But before we get there, let me actually frame what this actually means. One of our partners, HubSpot partners, actually mentioned this, and it stuck to me. He said this like more than a couple of months ago, which is retention is the new acquisition and helping is the new selling. Let's just think about that. Helping is the new selling. I really think that this is kind of the fundamental shift that we are making in business today, which is thinking about how do we help our customers navigate what is happening within the market. So this resonates with me deeply. Now, everything is not doom and gloom. There are plenty of opportunities that still exist for all of you that are looking at how do I thrive in the environment that we are in. So HubSpot did a survey of nearly 1,500 customers, and we asked what actually drives positive sentiment towards a company or a brand, and what actually drives negative sentiment towards a company or the brand. And we got some responses, but it was really surprising. On the positive side, when they really love companies, it's because those companies care deeply about the community as well as the customers within the community. They care deeply about that community. And then the second part of it is they are trustworthy. And in fact, when companies are trustworthy and have a fantastic community around them, then 90% of customers will actually continue and spend more with those kinds of companies, even in a market like we are facing right now. Now, that is pretty interesting. What is even more interesting is that the negative sentiment is, kind of exactly the same reasons. When, customers have negative sentiment over a brand or a company, it's because they're not trustworthy, they don't have a great community, and more importantly, they don't really show the care for the community and the customers within that community. This is, pretty interesting. It all comes down to trust. Everything that we see today in the business environment and in terms of the resilient growth that we are looking for comes down to trust. Do you build trust with your customers, and do you build trust within the community? This is really the context, with which we are actually entering a whole planning cycle for next year and thinking about growth. Now, at HubSpot, in March, as COVID and the pandemic and everything was unfurling, we had like one single motto, which is we need to bend but not break during this whole pandemic. And some years bring internal challenges, some years bring macroeconomic challenges, some years bring growth. But a resilient business model is a model where you can actually bend and then you can see the company take the stress of that bend, but not break. So everything that we do and all the conversations that we had internally in the first couple of months as we were thinking about how do we drive the pivot for the business was about bending, not breaking. Now, that is from a macro perspective. Just like every other organization, your organization included, we have our set of internal challenges that we were faced with for this year. So couple of internal challenges, not unlike your organizations, which is one, we lacked decision-making agility. How long does it take for you to make a decision? And is that actually okay when you're trying to bend and not break? In the case of what we were facing in March and April, we needed decisions in days, in hours. We couldn't wait for a decision-making committee and going through a long process. So we needed decision-making agility. And partly we were set up where every part of the customer experience was reporting to different organizations. This is one of the reasons why HubSpot took a step to bring together all of the customer-facing functions, marketing, sales, and customer success, and brought all of this under an umbrella. And you know what? That really helped, because as we were going through the initial stages of pivoting the organization, we were having daily meetings. We had daily, at the beginning of the day meetings and end of the day meetings, and we were shipping decisions on a day-to-day basis. That's an important challenge. The second part of it is that silos made our operating model pretty expensive. What do I mean by silos? I mean, you all know silos within marketing, silos within sales, silos within product. Now, companies don't really grow and say, you know what, I want a siloed organization. What happens is that hyper growth happens when you're growing really fast, when you have a ton of things happening within an organization. It's much better to kind of like add a number of people within each of the departments, and then you're left with silos. And then what happens? What happens is that you have to deal with these silos by adding more people for coordination, more time spent in meetings, more PMO functions popping up across the organization. You need a PMO to coordinate all of the PMOs. How many people have seen that within your organization? So those are the kinds of challenges that happen when you have silos. And then what happens? Customers experience your organizational structure. How many of you have the experience of calling customer support? Maybe it's the cable company, maybe it's a retail company, maybe it's something that you just purchased online. And you call them and you give them the information, and then they're like, wait, I need to send you to another department. And then they send you to another department, and they're like, oh, tell me all of your details all over again. We see this every single day, but that's what we end up doing to our customers. When they deal with sales, we don't provide the visibility of service, or so they call support, they don't have the visibility of the latest marketing campaign, and this happens. An end result is that customers experience organizational charts. And when customers begin to experience organizational charts, you have to be able to fix that. So that's the context that HubSpot found ourselves at the beginning of this whole process. And we've been kind of in this journey for the last couple of years. And even before the pandemic, part of our model was how do we build a playbook for resilient growth? And this is the 5 steps. I'm going to walk through each of those steps. I don't think this is the end all be all. I don't think this will fix everything, but I think it's really worked help power how we think about growth in a year like 2020, and then how do we set ourselves up for scale. So I really hope this inspires you to take one or parts of the playbook and then take it to your organization. So let me start with the first thing, which is the first part of the playbook in terms of setting up for resilient is actually unifying decision makers. And I alluded to this problem. I think we started with the same thing where our customer experience, the decision makers were spread across multiple places. So the first step in the process was bringing together all of the customer facing teams, and we call it the Flywheel Team. Why Flywheel? And probably never heard of the term Flywheel. Flywheel, typically what happens is that when you remove the friction and you put in the flywheel, it spins. It spins and it's typically positive. You get like that nice spin effect. And that is what is important in terms of the flywheel. So in what flywheel is bringing together marketing, sales, customer experience, and putting the customer at the center of it. That's the flywheel. In contrast to what? The contrast to flywheel is funnel. How many of you talk about the funnel? Well, the marketing leads come at the top, and then you actually begin to close sales, and then what? A customer lands at the bottom and there is no momentum because you haven't really thought about what are you going to do with the customer. And I said, as I said before, retention is the new acquisition and helping is the new selling. And so if you think about it, the flywheel concept makes a lot more sense. So part of our methodology and process is really bringing together marketing, sales, customer success. It's not important to just do that. You need to bring all of the cross-functional leaders that are key, part of the customer experience. And in our case, it is of course product, because if we don't have the product to sell, what are we going to sell? And so bringing together the product leaders, the cross-functional leaders across people ops, finance, all together. And this is the flywheel trust. This is the brain trust that we have created, a set of leaders within the organization that can make quick decisions. Now, in our case, a lot of the customer face executives together, you don't need to do that, but it is important to have a decision-making group that looks at the same type of data, knows and has the accountability to make decisions on behalf of the customer. So that's really important. We meet every 2 weeks. It's the same day. It's every other Tuesday, and it's about an hour and a half, and we know exactly the kinds of decisions we need to make and the types of frameworks that we will use to make the decision. So that's really, really important. The second part of it, once you have a decision-making group, you have to identify the right growth opportunities for your organization. Now think about this. There are multiple ways in which you do it. You can do it as a quantitative analysis to identify growth opportunities, and you can have qualitative feedback. And in fact, I recommend that you do both. So I joined HubSpot at the beginning of the year, and this is a really luxury for you to join an organization at the beginning of the year, because one, you can actually go around on a listening tour, and that's exactly what I did. I went on a listening tour, talking to our employees, talking to our customers, talking to our partners, and I had 2 questions for them. What are the biggest growth opportunities for HubSpot, and what do you think are the biggest challenges that are in the way of getting to those opportunities? Now, you know what? I got consistent answers from our employees, from our customers and our partners, and that was really key and foundational in creating what we have now as the strategy. So I definitely encourage you to start with that. Now, again, you don't need to necessarily join an organization to come up with that qualitative assessment. Do it go talk to your customers, go talk to your employees, go talk to your partners, and ask the same question every single year. The second part of it is actually using a quantitative framework to understand your growth opportunities. Now, this is where we do a little bit of drinking our own champagne. We have a growth grader. This is actually the framework that we use at HubSpot to help our customers figure out what their opportunities are as they're optimizing their go-to-market organizations and function. And I'll walk you through the simple framework. Hopefully you'll find it pretty easy to follow. The first part of it, the growth grader actually looks at the stage. The stage could be attract. Attract is marketing. Engage is sales. Delight is customer success. And then we also have fight friction. So those are the 4 stages. The next part of the framework is that we actually have maturity of each of these stages. So if you're very early in the process, you're initiating, or you're emerging, or you're accelerating or disrupting. So that's pretty much what the growth grader does. It takes all of your go-to-market processes and puts it into these 4 stages as well as the 4 phases. And how do you know this is actually effective? Well, if you identify the right growth opportunities and you're acting on those growth opportunities, then there's a single metric that over time, which is the revenue per go-to-market employee. About this, if you are driving efficiency, if you're focused on growth opportunities, you should be able to do this much more, and the revenue per employee in the organization has to increase. Now, we applied this framework to HubSpot. It wasn't surprising, but we saw areas where we needed to improve. Now, in Attract, this is a place that we did, actually get to kind of a really high level, which is disrupting stage. Now, most of you, if you've heard of HubSpot, you probably heard of the inbound methodology that we created many years ago. We're known for the inbound methodology, and we're known for kind of marketing. But even there, we found that we don't referrals really well. Part of the improvements that we did was actually introducing a customer marketing program and being able to drive advocacy through our marketing efforts. And so we learned something there. In terms of as well as customer success, we were kind of in the accelerating stage. What we found is that we have a lot of people talking to our customers, but those conversations are not very personalized. Personalized to the stage they're in, personalized to exactly the kind of challenges that they're facing. And therefore, we've invested in systems and processes and tools to really have much more personalized conversations with our customers. And then in the area of friction, like every other organization, we fight friction internally. And so there's a lot of work that we're actually doing, and we've identified in terms of the areas of improvement to remove friction and have better handoffs across the different teams. So this combination of quantitative as well as qualitative assessment has really helped us identify the areas within the organization where we can continue to improve. So that's kind of, playbook step number 2. So you have the right team, they're meeting on the right cadence, you've identified a lot of the growth opportunities. What do you do next? Well, the next step in the playbook is really you need to codify everything into a 3-year strategy. Why do you even need to actually have a go-to-market strategy? Because if you're like any scaling organization, you're going to get bombarded with opportunities. We need to improve systems. We need to improve data. We need to improve this process. We need to have better pricing. All of these different signals you're going to be getting across your organization. Now, you can kind of spread yourself thin and try to approach all those different opportunities, or you can say, no, I'm going to start with articulating a 3-year go-to-market strategy. So in our case, that's what we decided to do, because part of the focus for us was making sure that the lens that we used to create that 3-year strategy was customer in, not function out. Function out means I'm marketing, I'm customer success, have a strategy on how to reach out to the customers. But I don't really necessarily stop to think about who are all the other folks that are touching base with the, and it leads to all kinds of consequences. Have you ever gotten like a survey from the marketing department? 2 days later, you get, talk to me about customer success and support, and another survey, and then later you get a survey from us. Well, that's what happens when you have function out strategies, because they all think they're doing the right thing, but they're really not putting in the shoes of the customer to define what that strategy is. So our approach was to start align all these functions so that we would have one holistic rather than functional strategies attacking. So then, you got it like a framework. Now, strategy framework, there are so many different frameworks that you can actually find. If you go to like Amazon and look for a book on strategy and methodology or strategy and framework, you will probably get hit by thousands of books, and all of them will promote a way of looking at it. And I've read two of them, but one framework that stuck with me that I've used across multiple organizations is this Playing to Win. This is a book. It was written called Playing to Win. He was the former CEO of Procter and Gamble, and he co-authored it with Roger Martin, who's exceptional strategic mind. It's a simple frame taking through your organization or the company, developing a strategy. Four things. The first one is winning aspiration. What success look like for organization? Define it clearly, concisely, precisely. What does winning actually look like? The second, where to play. What are the strategic choices that you will make in terms of where you play? And then the third is how to win. And how do you actually create the tactics, the methodologies, and real play-by-play of what you will do in order to get to the strategic choices of where to win. And the fourth is how do you measure? How will you measure success? So if you're trying to create strategy, think about really spending the time with your leadership team to align on each of these four questions. And at HubSpot, we went through this process. It was about a 2-month process where we really brought together the teams and we asked ourselves this question of what's our winning aspiration? How do we play and where do we win? And how do we win and how do we measure success? And, the HubSpot mission is fairly critical, which is, how do we help millions of organizations grow? And the Flywheel team, which is the customer team, our aspiration is to deliver delightful customer experiences at scale. It came straight from this process. Now, once you've done that, the next step is how do I translate that longer go-to-market strategy into an actionable plan for the next year? That is an important, part of this process, because if you have a great vision but you don't have an executional plan, you're not going to win within the market. And so part of this is actually translating that 3-year strategy into 1-year vision. The framework here that we use, we call it MSPOT. M stands for mission. S stands for who we serve. And who we serve is customers, employees, and stakeholders and shareholders. So that's who we serve, that we run every single year. The targets for each of those plays. And be as specific as possible for a particular metric. We're going to move it X to Y. And that's the target. And then most important of all, omissions. What are you not going to do in the next year? And if that omission list is too short, you may want to reconsider and look at all of your priorities and see if you're setting your organization up for success. So that's the process that we use to define a 3-year strategy and translate that into a 1-year executionable plan so that we can hold all of us accountable for making the change that needs to happen over the next. So if you're with me now, we've gone through 3 steps of building a resilient growth plan. And once you have strategy, what do you need? You need systems and processes. And I think that this is a really, really important point. I'll tell you the number of organizations I've been part of, as well as I've advised those companies. Sometimes systems are phenomenal and they take the organization where they need to be. A lot of times the systems tend to be the long pole in the tent. And you got to think about why are systems, the long pole in the tent? Why does it take so much to be able to get the right data, the right information that you need in order to make your business strategies come to fruition? I think we underserve this investment in particular. I had the same question. I actually asked our head of technology group at the beginning of when I joined HubSpot, because I was hearing the same themes of, hey, we need to invest more in systems. And I said, so why are systems the way it is? Why do we have a lot of these questions? And why do we continue to be the long pole in the tent from a systems and process perspective? And he thought about it. He came back with a brilliant answer. His brilliant answer is this, which is, Yamini, today there's a ton of siloed strategies. when you have siloed strategies, which we've had for many years, that actually leads to disjointed systems, and disjointed systems actually create friction for both internal employees and externally for customers. So tell me, if you better systems, can you actually give me an aligned strategy? I think this like actually was an aha moment for me, because for years, I've been part of multiple organizations and journeys, and every time I do the same thing, which is like how to get the systems to be not long pole in the tent. And so this was a great thing. So on the flip side, what do we need? Systems excellence. In order to get your business priorities to be just operationalized and executed in the year, you need great systems. But in order to get systems excellence, you need aligned strategy. So step 3 is really, really important. Once you have step 3, then you actually need a systems roadmap. And that's the process that we've gone through. What we've said is, okay, we understand over the next 3 years. So what are the biggest priorities from a system perspective? What do we need to enable in terms of systems and processes? Can we prioritize that? Can we actually build a roadmap? A product roadmap is important, but your systems roadmap is equally important so that you can enable all of your strategies. And that's the process that we've gone through. We're pretty still in the process, so I won't say that we've figured things out, but we've certainly made a tremendous set of strides to get us to the point where we're up the business for growth, and much more importantly, resilient growth. So that's the step. So now the last part is measure what matters. I've now been part of a number of virtual roundtables and peer groups, and these are CCO peer groups and CRO peer groups. And almost every time we meet, one of the questions that we all grapple with is, what do we measure? Do we have a set of KPIs that we can measure? And can we use that consistently across the countries, the segments, the different businesses that we are responsible for? What do you do? What is the benchmark? This is all we carry. We're constantly trading notes in terms of the KPIs and the benchmarks, so we can learn from other companies. And I'll tell you, at HubSpot, we met a set of KPIs around our flywheel. So I talked about what the flywheel is. It is attracting, which is the marketing, and engaging with the sales, and delighting, which is the customer success. And we have customers and growth at the center of that. We have a handful of metrics. From a track, I won't go through each of these. You can certainly take a picture of it and drop me a note if you have questions. The attract stage, it is traffic at the top level. It is the volume of the traffic, and it's also the impact of that traffic from a monthly recurring revenue perspective. From a sales, you want to measure both leading indicators as well as lagging indicators. So the output of sales obviously ends up in revenue, or annual recurring revenue, or monthly recurring revenue if you're monthly. One of those is the output. But then what are the lead indicators? It is the number of deals created. It is the calls you have. It's the number of deals that are, and the ASP of those. Those are really important. So you got to measure a combination of leading indicators as well as lagging indicators. In terms of light stage, it's rare. There are 2 metrics that are super important critical here. First one is customer dollar retention, or churn. So in every business, especially within the SaaS business, you have to what is the overall churn within your business, and you have to measure it. Even more important measure is revenue retention. Revenue retention is the ultimate metric in SaaS, which is minus the downgrades that you have plus the upgrades that you have. And so it really actually tells you, are you keeping your customers? Are you continuing to provide value for the customers? Because if they are, they're staying with you and they are continuing to buy from you. That's the ultimate measure. And so that we actually look in terms of the key metrics. So that's kind of the playbook, and this is not a one. These are steps that we revisit year, we find a year, but think about this year and even set ourselves up for the future in terms of growth and scale. Here, that's the 5 steps in the playbook we keep going back and revisiting, and this has really helped us storm what 2020 has actually thrown at us. Now, this is actually, my colleague, John. John is in our marketing organization, and this was 2 years ago. He did a ceremonial, taking the funnel, which we don't quite like because it drops the customer at the bottom, and he blended out the funnel so we can create the flywheel. So he was like figuratively showing that we are, taking away the funnel and creating like a flywheel. We started this journey more than a couple of years ago, and we've been it. And I can't say that we have, completely gotten through it, but we have definitely set ourselves up for resilience within the company, within the organization, within the growth, and we're setting ourselves up for, scale. So I'll kind of revisit, what I started with, which is what is, growth in 2020? What does it actually look like? I think as we've redefined almost everything in our life, we have to redefine what growth means. And for HubSpot, we think about it as the growth promise that we have. And our growth promise is quite different. It is not like any other promise that we've made before. The fundamental of this is that the value that you do is way more than your product. Your employees are definitely more than their job titles. Your customers and partners are more than the deal size that they actually represent. And in times of crisis, growth is doing the right thing, especially when it is very hard to do the right thing. Growth is really a promise you make to your customers, to your partners, and to your employees that what you're building today will be there tomorrow. I think that's how we think about resilient growth. I really hope that I have inspired and provided a spark for each of you to think about your business, your journey, and apply some of the steps within the playbook. I'd love to hear from you, so reach out to me on LinkedIn if I can ever be of help. With that, I will pass it back and maybe welcome Beth in.
Thank you so much, Yamini. The growth promise inspired a lot of conversation in the chat. I really love that. I really love that employees are more than their job titles and customers are more than their bill. I love that.
That's right. Yeah.
So we do have some questions from the audience, and we do have an ample amount of time to answer them. So we'll start with Amanda, actually. So Amanda wonders, what have your customers needed this year that's different? How have you pivoted to meet them where they are? And what do you still need to do?
Yeah, thank you so much, Amanda, for the question. Absolutely. This year has been like in no other. And, partly for us in March and April, we had to put ourselves into the shoes of our customers. The most immediate question for them was uncertainty in terms of what COVID means, how long this, shutdown was going to last. And so we did a few things immediately in March. First of all, we actually offered a lot of flexible payment terms. We knew that some industries and some customers were deeply impacted if you were in transportation, all those kinds of industries. So we offered flexible payment terms. The second thing, a lot of our customers needed to very quickly actually move from offline marketing into digital marketing. And so we moved a number of paid features into our free tier so that they could get in touch with their customers. And then we also dramatically reduced the price of our starter growth suite and product because we knew that customers could get value, but they're not going to have the cash. In terms of our partners, we actually knew that, again, they were going to face a ton of uncertainty with everything that was getting happen. So we actually gave them advanced commissions for a period of time. And so those, we did it super quickly. Having a decision-making team, like I mentioned, helped really make those decisions very fast and roll it out. And the that we received from our partner community and the customer community was really heartwarming. Sometimes they sent us an email saying, hey, what you did for us helped us save 2 people and not having to lay them off. And those emails that are really heartwarming for us to reach, that we actually impacted someone's life and livelihood. So that, and of course, we have to do, but we look for that type of feedback from customers and look at where they are within the journey and help them, help meet them where they are.
Excellent. Thank you. So earlier on, you also said that you found friction in personalizing conversations with customers. So curious, how did you work to personalize those conversations at such a large scale?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, Beth. Think about the number of handoffs that tend to happen in an organization. It's certainly true for us. You have a person that actually helps in sales, and they go through the process and they actually complete the sale, and then there's a handoff to a services team member. Then there's a handoff to a customer support team member and a customer success team member, and then we had like all these different handoffs. One point, like we mapped the customer journey, and there were 8, 9, 10 people trying to talk to the customers at the same time, including people like me. I'm like, I want to talk to the customers, and last week someone else might have spoken. So part of the challenge was, how do you have so many handoffs but yet make sure that time this is where the conversation with HubSpot ended, and this is where we are picking up. And so in order to do that, we needed to make sure that the systems that our teams were using, that I could log into, a salesperson can log into, anybody coming and doing a support ticket could log into, and they would get like a 360 view of the customer and a great view of the last conversation we've had. And so that's where, again, like that journey is not complete, but that's where we are investing from a systems perspective, so that the context of the conversation we're having with the customer carries through, those multiple stages.
Right. Okay. I like that. And so then when you're talking about kind of proving that the value of those conversations and the things that you're changing and how those things are making it less friction, have
Yes.
less friction.
Yes.
How do you find the balance between quantitative and qualitative metrics? And
Yeah.
when you're talking about the metrics, do you change them depending on who you're talking to in the
Yeah,
company?
I think that's a brilliant question, Beth, because you do have to have like a balance of quantitative and qualitative. One of the things that we did is something called the voice of the customer. And the voice of the customer basically brings this balance of quantitative and qualitative. There's a team, it's a mighty team, of like 3 or 4 people. So it's not a very large team, but they're mighty. And what they do every month, our entire management team, is they do 2 things. First of all, they put a customer panel together. So they bring together 4 or 5 customers, all dealing with maybe the same 2 or 3 issues. Maybe it's pricing issue, maybe it's billing issue, maybe it's like, some kind of upgrade issue. They bring those customers together. And so we start off that customer first meeting listening directly, to our customers on what they really love about HubSpot and what they do not like and where they want to see improvement. That's the first, 45 minutes. The next 45 minutes is all about quantitative data on the same topic. So if the topic happens to be billing, for instance, then the team actually brings together the quantitative data and like looks across the board. So this combination of listening to our customers directly and seeing the emotion and the passion they bring to a particular issue, and then looking at the quantitative information. So these two, it's incredible. Everybody that's listening to it, and it is, our CEO absolutely sits and listens to this. Our founders listen to this. Our head of product listens to it. I certainly listen to it, and my leadership team listen, and we all hear the same kind of feedback. Then it's pretty easy to mobilize and get the next steps going in terms of how we, respond to that feedback, and then what we are doing in terms of a feedback loop to go back to our customers and say, here's what we're taking based on the qualitative and quantitative feedback that we have gotten from you.
I love that, Yamini. I feel like that is kind of that's the magic of community, is putting your customers together in one room. And it can be a little nerve-wracking to have your customers sit together and all talk about what they don't like about your features or your product.
Absolutely.
But I think that that's where that magic comes from. So I appreciate that you do that and you put yourself in chin.
Absolutely. That's truly magical. It's one of my favorite meetings, and I encourage everybody in the community to think about how you can, bring together that customer community and your overall community together. So thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to be here. And I know the next is, dancing. So I'll let you, go and enjoy that.
Thank you so much for coming, Yamini. It was a pleasure to have you on our stage.